So we focus, yes, on quality. Trap House as a brand is quality, but price driven as well. So
Yeah.
we're trying to drive the market to a place where people do get a better understanding of what quality is through our products, but then deliver it at an affordable price.
Dean, welcome. Thanks for joining me on the podcast here. How you doing?
I'm the best I've ever been. How are you?
That's awesome. I'm doing well too. It's funny how anytime you usually ask that question, someone's got like a, half negative sort of groaning and moaning response that's like their habitual thing
Yeah.
that they say. So if someone says, "Oh, I'm doing great," you're like, "Whoa,
Yeah,
what?"
right. Well, that's actually funny enough, that's like my typical response to that question is, I'm the best I've ever been. As long as we're focusing on the moment that we're in and not thinking too much about all the troubles, a lot of it's just kind of a choice. So I try to choose to be the best, and if not, I am really sarcastic about it, and people still appreciate the answer.
I can't tell if he's joking or whatever. I was gonna nod and go. Cool, man. Well, why don't we start off? Why don't you tell me a little bit about your background? How did you get into the industry?
Sure.
How'd you get into your current venture? And yeah,
Man, okay. Well, it was kind of a journey, as everybody I'm sure had. So my background, I started in restaurants a long time ago. I was in food service. I was undergoing culinary training, and I went through a technical center and was getting into restaurant management. I was a chef, wrote a lot of menus. The restaurant industry also is pretty heavy with cannabis use at the same time. And I had always been interested in cannabis, since I was 12 or 13. I think I smoked first when I was 13, and I entered into the market when I was
hmm.
15, 16. But I remember at a point in time that we had a class discussion when I was in eighth grade, and it was, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? What is your big goal and what's your accomplishment? And I was, reading all the high times and looking at everything with weed, and it was like this kind of alien plant with trichome heads and all these things on it, and I was really enamored at that point, and I hadn't even really cracked into it. And in
Yeah,
the back of my mind, I remember thinking, I want to grow the best weed and all the weed in the world. And that was like what my internalized monologue was. Externally, I said, I'm going to be a chef. So I did that, but then I also held on to the cannabis thing. So
kind of still a chef in many ways, right?
yeah,
Different
yeah.
kind.
Well, the background in restaurant management, and especially in the kitchen, it gives a lot of good good skills that we can use in business and in the cannabis industry
Hmm.
specifically. So recipes are like SOPs, right? Or you deal with a lot of interesting, very strange challenges in the cannabis industry, and there's oftentimes a lot of thinking on your feet as well.
Hmm.
So those things all kind of mesh together. So anyways, I did restaurants, and I wanted to get into growing weed a lot more seriously at some point in time. And in 2008, Michigan put forth its medical program, the MMMP, and I became a patient immediately and started helping friends grow. In 2010, I bought my house. And that was at the point in time where there was a first time home buyer's credit. And my plan was, I'm going to take this and I'm going to build a grow room in my basement.
First
And
time home growers credit.
that's right. That's right. So that's what I did. Built my grow room, and it was constant reinvestment. And from there, it was just building on that and building on that and building on that. So fast forward a little while, I started another operation, and in 2013, actually, I was raided, and
Hmm.
I am a weed felon on top of all of this too. So and that's since been expunged, and like I said, it's been a crazy journey. But during that time, like a lot of other growers and people that were in cannabis, I had a really heavy like lone wolf mentality. And because we
Yeah.
all experience success on this individual level, and everything we do has been our way. We haven't had any outside influence, and nobody needed suggestion, and
Right.
that all rapidly changed. So that was a huge silver lining to this experience, right? And I was rated. I couldn't grow at home alone anymore, so I operated specifically and only in partnerships, just so I could be as legal as I could. And that really primed me for the future in operating with other people and learning to compromise and learning to operate with other people. And that's where I think a lot of people in cannabis have had a lot of challenges. They come out of that, sole proprietor, successful lifestyle, and then they're thrown
Yeah.
into this other thing with so many other people, and it's really hard to function and really hard to navigate. But I had spent the last several years, doing that and working with people. So that's how I got into cannabis, and where I'm at now. I at some point started working in hydroponic stores and extraction supply stores so that I could get better discounts, so I could operate at a lower cost, so I could make
Hmm.
money. And I wound up at a place in Battle Creek called the Big Green Tomato, and I just put in 1 day a week to get a discount. And my current partner owned that store.
Hmm.
So they had a background understanding and knowledge of me that was a good person, upstanding, following through with the things that I was saying that I would do, and approached me in 2018 with a couple other people and said, "Hey, do you want to do this with us? We're gonna get into it." And I said, "Sure." And in between, that time, I had set up some 100 light grows and some other spots. I had been extracting on a closed loop apparatus since like 2012 personally, so I have a huge background in that. And um, here I am. We we built Arcana Trap House Company in Three Lefts. And actually, just last week, I saw that Trap House Company was the sixth highest rated brand by sales in LeafLink for Metric. Um,
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Kind
Yeah.
of, this is my first crack at the legal market. So far, it's going good. Um, but yeah, I
Well, I
guess
think you guys are doing a lot of the right stuff. You're just focusing on doing quality, which sounds obvious, but I think that you kind of you stay disciplined kind of with your operations, right? Like you do certain things really well, and rather than try to do everything, you're really leaning in on those core competencies. At least that's how it seems from the outside.
definitely. Well, that's absolutely correct. You always want to play to your strengths and focus on your weaknesses and learn where you're weak so that you can get those a little bit better. But where you're weak, other people will definitely be strong, and that's where you want to surround yourself with people that are better than you in any way, shape, or form that you can, so that you can become better as an organization and as a company. So we focus, yes, on quality. Trap House as a brand is quality, but price driven as well. So
Yeah.
we're trying to drive the market to a place where people do get a better understanding of what quality is through our products, but then deliver it at an affordable price. And I bring up Tommy Boy a lot because
Great
if
movie,
you're
is that
familiar with
right?
Tommy Boy, yeah. So one of my biggest drives is I make hash for the American working man because that's what I am and that's who I care about. So much like the guy who was acquiring Callahan parts, that's kind of the drive is we want hash and marijuana to be good and affordable. And that's
Yeah.
really, really the big thing is not just selling to dispensaries, but making sure the end client can pick your product up as well and enjoy it. So there's a lot of things that go on there. We focus on our processes and in our production to just do whatever we can to bring quality to the table.
Can you kind of lean into that a little bit and tell me about some of the things you guys are doing to really make sure that you're bringing quality for both your
Yeah.
brands?
So when it comes to it all starts with the grower, right? And being that I also am a grower, I can go out and I do go out to other growers and farms, and instead of just picking up biomass via phone calls, and
Mhm.
unless I'm very well familiar and acquainted with somebody, I will drive all over the state. It does not matter where. I'm going to show up to the farm and I'm going to see your product. I want to see how it's handled. I want to see how it's stored. I want to look at it. I want to get my hands in it. I want to smell it. I want to become intimately familiar with it and what I should be able to expect from it, and look at
Yeah.
it from a different standpoint of what are you treating it with? What's your IPM program look like? How old is this material, and go through kind of a litany of questions, and really start at the biomass. And I'm focusing on the hash side a lot, I guess, or the extract side. And then in our construction, we built a very large freezer to hold absolutely everything that we could. So storage is a big part of that. Cannabis, cannabinoids, terpenes, all that kind of stuff begins to change as
Mhm.
time goes on. And if it's in a warm, well-lit area, it's not going to be as good as something that's frozen. So we
Right.
built a big walk-in freezer for that. And
Probably a
then
big competitive advantage too, because most people in the Michigan market anyway, there are some folks that have some big capacity freezers, but I feel like a lot of people that are doing fresh frozen don't really have a lot of capacity, so you're
you're
able to snap up
absolutely
a lot
right.
more.
You're absolutely right. And in fact, so the big thought behind that was, especially come fall, when people are taking their crops down, and they don't want to lease out diesel generators
Mm,
and reefer trucks to hold all their stuff. I can say, yeah, you can ship me over 6,000 pounds, 8,000 pounds, 10,000 pounds, whatever it is,
right.
and we
Store
can
it
store
on
it on
site.
site.
Yeah.
That's right. We'll take it, and if somebody
Get to
has
cherry pick the cream of the crop off it as well, right?
that's right. That's right. Same thing with greenhouse harvests. If somebody wants
Yeah.
to take something to solventless production, yep, send the whole greenhouse. We can hold on to it, no problem. So that's kind of step two in the process is storage. Step three in the extraction process is the machinery that you're using. So being that I have a long background in hydrocarbon extraction and extract in general, that was machinery that I built and designed this whole place, right? All the machinery I had selected, and our hydrocarbon free unit, or for instance, was picked because it would operate under the parameters that we wanted. It could
Mm.
hold temperatures. It was made to be a hash rocket ship, is what these
Mm.
things would need to be. So that's the third step in the process, is getting
Did you have to sounds like you might have done some custom engineering on that thing too a bit.
well, now, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So part of that is knowing what we want, and part of that is knowing what things should be able to perform at. So yes, they will sell you something out of the box,
Yeah.
but how do you tweak it and tune it to really make it scream and fly? So we got a unit, and from there, one of our guys actually added some things onto it, some manifolding, so that it would be a lot more streamlined. We changed the recovery so that it would operate a lot faster, and use
Mm.
a lot less consumables, and just kind of anywhere that we could improve it, we could improve it. And now, like, the next big step is either different machinery or $250,000 in chiller units. So it's like
Right.
where it's at, it's pretty well maxed out.
What kind of rig is it, out of curiosity?
It's a Busy Bee.
Oh yeah, Busy Bee's
Actually,
a
I'm
good
actually
deal.
wearing a Busy Bee t-shirt right now.
Nice.
Um,
What's his name? Boris?
Boris, yeah, he's a character. We love Boris. He's a smart guy, and he designed some really good machinery. And there have been some advancements in hydrocarbon extraction technology, since then, since we bought. But we're still really happy with what we've got, and it obviously is working really, really well for us. And then we have to focus on the process itself and our operators. So when we hired people in, we hired in a guy who is no longer with us to kind of start off our team. And being that I was operating in the traditional market for so long, I had a guy that had worked with me that I had taught up to that point, probably everything he knew about extraction except from what he had read. But he's a very passionate guy. And at some point, 3 months in, I brought him on, and helped bring him into the legal market. He was working third shift at a factory. You know, he had left everything behind, and now he's our current lab manager, actually, and he's helping to drive all those processes and to improve our game anywhere we can. So there's been a lot of advancement in especially hydrocarbon extraction since we started, since I left the traditional market. And
Yeah.
he's a really passionate guy, and he wants to keep up on that. So when I say, hiring people who are better than you are, this is one of those instances where my focus is different now as a person, as a business person, as a cannabis business person. I can't be in the trenches. I can't be
Right.
operating machinery. I can't be turning knobs. And to his credit, he really can't either, but he can keep us on our game. He keeps us on our game, and
Yeah.
keeps the quality high. And he's not shy about telling me when he thinks something sucks, and I'm not shy
You,
about
you need that though, right? Like you
No,
need the
absolutely.
people that are you've got to empower your team to feel comfortable speaking out when there is a concern, but you also have to find those folks that some people just won't do that. And
Yeah.
they think that they're maybe being overly critical, but like that's how you improve. And like you said yourself, you're not necessarily there turning the knobs, and so you don't always know what's going on the floor, right? And
Yeah.
especially as you scale up, you start to see that, right? It's like, hey, I can't be the technician, and how do you have that communication pathway there so that you're that well-oiled machine between someone like yourself that is managing the department and the people and the operation, right, as opposed to the person that's managing the process now.
Yeah.
Operation I was at before, we actually kind of like made a two-person team on each of our sort of operational functions. So our cultivation team had a director of cultivation partnered with a tech, we call him a tech lead, right? Who's like the OG 20 plus year grower. Didn't necessarily have a background in business, right? Wasn't great on a computer, that kind of thing, but super passionate and knowledgeable about cannabis. And then we brought in someone who vibed very well with them on a personality basis, but who was much more, up to speed on the sort of the business management side of things, understood growing, but definitely not as well as the guy that was the artist, right? And so we kind of packaged them together, and we did something similar on the manufacturing side, where we had like the mad scientist, which called him the chef, ironically, but he was just in there just figuring things out, building off new rig attachments and stuff like that. Didn't have the capacity or the time, or necessarily the strength to do all the management stuff. And so it's equally important, but I think that's an area that a lot of companies miss, is they try to have one person that does everything, or the owner, the owners, as they scale that up, they still try to retain that sort of granular control, and it makes it really hard to
Really
grow.
hard.
Yeah,
Really hard. Well, yeah, and to your point about finding people that those artists vibe with, that's really, really, really important, because you do need that basis for passion and people who are really on the pulse of what's going on in not necessarily the industry, but in the world of cannabis, because the world of cannabis is a lot larger than the industry, and the world of cannabis at large really drives what happens in the industry. The trends don't necessarily start within the industry, so you need people who are in tune with that, and you also need people. And if you find somebody that's a very rare kind of hybrid breed that can handle both the management side, that is very good in both the boardroom and the grow room, then man, awesome. But those are kind of two separate jobs. Then
they really are two separate professional pathways, really.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because no one's ever done growing, so it's like they may be great, but like you want them to get better over time. And so are they going to get better going this direction or this direction? Are they going to split their time? It's inefficient. Yeah.
And that communication between those two ends, is really critical to the success of any organization. You have it can cause a lot of heartache and a lot of upset within an organization if your passionate people feel like they're not being heard, because there's just this communication barrier between the business and executive side and the people who drive the business too. And that's really where I hit a really, really, really good middle ground because I operate in the boardroom really, really well. I can sit down with executives, banking executives and lawyers, and we can speak the same language. And I can take that and I can package that and I can bring it to our director of cultivation or our lab manager and say the same thing, but differently, I guess,
in
and
their
get them
language,
to
right?
understand and transmit communications backward a little bit better. And that's really where I've been focused lately is both on the B2B side, business acquisitions, but improving our systems in place and processes and developing a lot of spreadsheets. I am like super ninja with Microsoft Excel
Yep.
and and auto calculating spreadsheets and all these things that really provide for some good tools for everybody to understand each other and do their job.
That's great. Let's go back a little bit to what you were talking about, kind of like translating the communication into the language that people can understand. How does someone that maybe isn't that skilled at doing that, that's finding themselves in a position where they're going to need to be able to provide that sort of duality between, like you said, the boardroom and some of that higher level discussion, but then bring that down to the folks that are running the operation every day, right? Like what are some ways that people can get better at stuff like that if they don't feel like that's a personal strength?
You definitely have to be patient, and if you're not patient, you have to learn patience, and you have to be very objective, because what I do see a lot of is when people start to get asked questions, they have like an internal miscommunication between what is a question and what is kind of feeling like they're being persecuted for something, and a lot of times that's not the case. So you really have to be patient and objective in that, and very analytical. Remove all emotion from anything that happens during those discussions, and focus on the common goal of what everybody has, and that is doing this thing, whether that thing is baking a pie, whether it's roasting a prime rib, whether it is growing a whole lot of weed as good as you can, and getting better at it. If you really want to be better, you have to be your own worst critic,
Yeah.
and try and put yourself into the shoes of other people, and understand why they're asking the questions that they're asking, and objectively answer them too, and be comfortable. And this was a learning thing for me, and I'm glad that I got rated forever ago, and glad that I had the silver lining. You really have to be comfortable with saying, I didn't do as good as what I could do, or I didn't try hard enough, or I failed, or any of these things, and really be objective about it. And that's where you can start to get better, is looking at what you're doing and the process, and improving it, and being totally objective about it. It's a hard thing to do. It's an emotional journey, and it requires a lot of growth and maturity in people to be able to tackle that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think when you're talking about being able to admit, your sort of role in the things that go on, especially as a leader, right? Like that's one of the main things you have to learn, is that like ultimately anything that stops, the buck stops with you. It is your responsibility. If something goes bad, you really can't throw it on the person below you, because your obligation and your job was to help them be successful. So if they're not successful, then it's kind of more of a reflection on you, right? And
Absolutely.
at first, it's kind of like hits that ego, but then when you realize that what that really means is that you have power over the sort of circumstances around you, it's actually kind of like an empowering feeling if you can kind of move past that
Absolutely.
defensive
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's like a defense mechanism where people try to protect their egos, and everybody wants to sit here and play the blame game and point fingers and say, we didn't achieve this objective because so and so,
right.
didn't do something. But ultimately, everything in an organization rises and falls on leadership. And whether that's a person or leadership as a task or as a concept, it's really important to internalize that, and live the business life, I guess, in accordance with that, and really take ownership of everything around you.
Couldn't agree more. I love it. Tell me about some of your challenges that you guys have had maybe with your current organization, what are you guys sort of obstacles maybe that you've overcome, or some learning experiences you had along the way?
Well, I think that within most cannabis organizations that they would have the same thing. Communication is a huge barrier, just like I just talked about.
Yeah.
And really learning to work together as a unit and to trust your counterparts to be able to carry out their tasks successfully, and really learning to um, pick pick your battles or pick what you're going to do and let other people do their jobs and stay in their lanes and expect results and hold everybody accountable. Those are all things that were challenges and they still exist as challenges. Everybody could always it's one of the easiest things in the world to say we need to communicate better, right? But what does
Right.
that mean? And
Right.
what's beyond communication? What does it mean to communicate and what does it mean to connect with somebody? Those are two different things. And to really be able to navigate that. So
What are the differences between those, if you want to clarify a little bit?
well, to be able to connect people, I guess. If I'm thinking about the two sides, and we're all on the same side, but the grower and the executive, they can communicate with each other. But in this example, I kind of serve as that connection piece because you can speak both
Got it.
languages, and when you connect with somebody, you can hear what they're saying, but then you can understand what they're meaning. And those two things are different sometimes, and you can move a lot faster if you connect with people on the business level and don't just communicate.
Yeah.
Um,
I think maybe listening too. I know that's it's like one of the hardest things for people to do well is learning how to listen.
yeah.
Great at talking maybe, but
Yep.
hard to listen.
Yeah. Yep. And a lot of times people will be heard, but they won't be listened to. Those are two kind of different things as well. So
So,
being able to do that and make people feel like they have been listened to,
mhm.
that's a different thing.
Instead of having that like, oh, you come put your suggestion in the
Yeah,
circular bin. It's like,
yeah,
well, nothing I've ever said has ever had any effect. So
right. And so there's an example that we can take and say, how can you as a person dropping that suggestion into the suggestion box, what can you do beyond that to feel heard? Well, if it were me, and I'm the most persistent person in the world, I swear, I hear it all the time, like to the point of being annoying. But if I felt something was valuable enough and I put it in that suggestion box, then you better believe that I'm going to go to whoever opens that suggestion box and I'm going to say, "Hey, did you get my suggestion?"
yeah.
And if they say yes or no, it's going to be a different conversation. And what did
Right.
you think of my suggestion? Why is that good? Why is that bad? And really truly try to understand what's going on in that person's head. And if I didn't convey my idea appropriately to have that conversation and convey it better so that I feel like I'm heard, because a lot of times that's on me as the person who is trying to put it out there. If somebody isn't receiving my message, then I try to change that message into a different form that they can package up and comprehend a little bit better. And that's what effective communication really is about: is how are you packaging your message?
Well, it's interesting as you're saying this, because what I'm kind of hearing is that, especially when you're putting yourself in that position for the example, you're taking responsibility on your side as well. Even if you're talking to, like in this theoretical position, you're talking to your boss or whatever, right? Like you're proactively asking the questions to start that conversation. And I think that's a really good point because yes, ultimately the leadership needs to focus a lot more in general in this industry on uh, understanding, connecting with their people, but also everybody's a grown up, and I think that at some point, like people need to take a little bit of responsibility as well and say, hey, like if I want to progress as a professional, what can I do to you know take some of that control over? It's the same thing as what we were talking about with the the leader taking responsibility stuff. Like if you take responsibility for your situation, it becomes a thing that you can control, and there's a lot more power in that, you know.
Definitely, definitely. It's taking ownership of whatever situation you're in. I want to take ownership of my suggestion in the suggestion box. I want to take ownership of that communication. I want to take ownership of making sure that I'm conveying my ideas in a way that makes sense. And a lot of times during a conversation, where there's some semi-complex ideas or maybe some things that might get people in their feelings a little bit and make them feel uncomfortable, because in cannabis, when you start talking SOPs and procedure and process, that's something that is really foreign to a lot of people, and they get they feel
they know the word SOP, but they have no idea what it is.
Yeah, they feel kind of.
Those are those things we never ever do. We just talk about
it. Right. Well, it's that you don't want to have an organization that relies solely on tribal knowledge. That's dangerous. It's a dangerous place to be. So you have to have that on paper, and it's easier to hold people accountable for that. But as it pertains to conveying my ideas, in a lot of conversations, I'll pause and I'll ask, does that make sense? And it's not a question of like, are you following me? Or I just want you to say yes. I literally am asking, does this make sense to you? Because if it doesn't, then I'm not communicating effectively.
Right. Am I making sense?
Yeah, exactly. That's a way better way. I'm going to say that from now on. That is a way better way to put that. Am I making sense? Not does that make sense? Because that puts it more on me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. Everybody has a different learning style too, right? So some people, whether it's the communication style and the word choice and stuff like that. And there's some, I was just having a meeting earlier today with a professional an engineering professional, and he was going through some equations and stuff. And, it's super like talking about electricity and whatnot. It's like second nature to him. Right. And I just asked the simple question, like, hey, can we break down these equations? And he's like, yeah, I forget that I know this stuff so well that it's like obvious to me. Right. And I think all of us suffer from that to a certain degree. And sometimes we feel like we're being clear because we're talking about something that we know so well that the person that we're speaking to maybe doesn't understand some fundamental part of that we've already, there's an assumption, an implied assumption that's already covered. And so then everything else you're saying after that is built on this false foundation, right? And it's a challenge for some people because they sort of feel, going back to the ego thing, they feel kind of like attacked if someone says that they don't understand. Like, well, what's the matter with you? It's like, just figure out a different, just figure out where that miscommunication is, identify that, and then start from there and rebuild it. And ultimately, if the goal is to have someone understand what you're saying, then, you got to make the effort, right?
Definitely.
What do you think, if you had to pick like a couple, this key points that sort of separate sort of from what you've seen, especially in the Michigan market? I think this is such a great question because the Michigan market has been so brutal to, sort of separating those that are going to survive from those that aren't. What separates those folks? Like, what makes a good operator in whatever regard versus someone that's not going to make it, in your opinion?
You have to be willing to change and not necessarily turn on a dime all the time and change, but you really have to watch your processes and really understand your numbers if you are going to survive. When we run a cost analysis, and here's another area where I'm pretty good at, and it really helps with Excel. But when we're running cost analysis, we'll break everything down, and I mean, on a utility cost per month, we'll do it by square footage of the entire business because we have a dispensary, a grow, and a processing facility all under one roof. So
you'll kind of apportion it proportionally, basically.
Yep. Well, I'll do it by square footage, and I'll give the grow side a multiplier of like 1.2 and take it away from the dispensary because the grow is a lot more energy intensive. But you really have to get deep into that stuff and understand, what your costs for fertilizer per gallon are, per what yield per gram or per square foot looks like, your grams per square foot. People will still talk, in terms of pounds per light, which is kind of an antiquated measurement. And one of the things I learned in my restaurant career from a guy who I hated working for, but you can learn anything from anybody, whether it's from a dishwasher or some dude that you hate. But
I learned a lot of things from bosses that I hate, I'll tell you that.
Yep. So he once said the words, if you can measure it, you can manage it. And I think that you really can measure just about anything. And if you can measure anything, then you should be able to manage anything, or at least understand how you can improve on that. So,
Yeah.
understanding your numbers is critical to success in this market, because Michigan very quickly became a market that was based almost solely on price. There's a lot of commodity products out there, especially with distillate manufacture. Brand carries no weight in the world of distillate cartridges. Doesn't matter who
Yeah.
you are, really. If
Not
you
when it's
sell
20
them,
for 100. Yeah.
that's right. That's right. So, and brand only carries so much weight in other areas too. So you have to understand, how much can I produce a pound for, or what did my cost per pound come out at this last round? What does it mean to pull 6 flips a year per room, versus 5 flips a year, but if we get 22 pounds more per flip, and run these different analyses and scenarios and really come up with what works best for you as a company, and then you can understand the margins that you can operate on, and hopefully sweat out the the great price crash that started in 2021, and we're starting to see some recovery. Thank the load. But our first harvest happened right when the Viridis recall hit, and Viridis just happened to be, this is our first harvest, right? And all my friends, everybody I know in the cannabis market, they're like, Viridis is the guys to test with. They're impressive. They've got a great lab, whatever. Okay, so I take the word of my friends that had experience in the market, and that's the lab that I went with. Very first harvest, everything hits the fan. All of our product gets recalled, and hell,
Yeah.
oh my God, yeah. And then shortly after that, so that happened, and then dispensaries had to refill their shelves with products. So there was kind of
we opened a shop, our tall wash shop that I was telling you about. Literally, we opened it, and the same week we opened, the Viridis recall happened, and we had to completely empty our shelves. It was
had to empty your shelves, and then you had to rebuy everything and put it back on your shelves. And then the product got put back into metric, and then you didn't need to buy anything. And that created a backlog within the entire industry, and the price just bottomed out. That was it. Right then, the entire industry just bottomed out, and it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. Distillate, went down to $900 a liter at one point, and that there are other market forces at play there.
I was gonna say, like, it was kind of interesting when a certain operator got busted, and then like a week later, the prices skyrocketed.
Yeah, and they weren't the only one, and there are a lot
definitely
of
not
there,
definitely
but a lot of people who were kind of using the same methodology to drive pricing down stopped at that time too, because they got really scared, and then we started to see a rise in price. But this was like over the course of 18 months. So when we finally got to market with flower, and our lab had been functioning for like 2 months at this point, but that's when everything really hit the fan. And that's trial by fire. My whole life has been just like this one giant trial by fire. whether it's moving out of my parents' house at 17, or having a child when I was young, or being rated and trying to figure out all these things in life. Oh, here's another one. So it's like the best way to learn anything, though, if you can make it through. And we're still here.
As long as you don't mind like dying maybe 5-10 years earlier than your average non-cannabis professional, then
oh man, it's I don't know what I would do if those kind of things didn't happen on a fairly consistent basis. Life would be pretty boring, and I would not be as I wouldn't have the same rounded skill set that I have, certainly. So I'm thankful.
That's 100% true. The real versatility that you get in this industry, you have to kind of learn everything, especially at your level, right? You have to learn accounting and obviously all types of operations. You're not necessarily just dealing with, even if you're just even if you are a manufacturing company primarily, you still have to understand and deal with the cultivation, even if it's not under your own roof. It's like you said, right? You've got to go out and you have to know the questions to ask and be able to monitor your partners. And same thing with retail. You got to know how to sell your product to the end consumer. Otherwise the shops aren't going to buy your stuff. So it's a very wide swath of skills you need to be in this
Yep, you have to
industry.
be a very dynamic person to be able to flourish in that kind of environment, and it's good. I love a challenge. I really do. Life would not be nearly as interesting without challenges. So rise to the occasion and become better at whatever it is, and live to fight another day. So here I am fighting.
Putting out fires.
Yep.
All right. Well, I like to kind of kick off sort of as we wind this down with a couple just standard questions I ask everybody. First question is, where do you see the cannabis industry 5 years from now?
Oh man, the cannabis industry is like 10 times faster moving than any other industry that
Yeah,
exists.
dog years,
I
they say.
what I hope in 5 years, I don't know what will be, because that's a fool's errand to try and predict that. But what I hope is that we will have a much firmer grip on the regulatory structure and framework that exists within the cannabis space, so that honest operators can exist and flourish within the regulated landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that means, whether it's banking, whether it's further and stricter enforcement of traditional market materials coming in or moving out, whatever that means, that's where I hope to be. I made a choice a long while ago that I came from the traditional market. I was a caregiver. I have tons of friends that still are, and I have no beef with that whatsoever. But I made a choice a while ago that this is what I saw as the future for cannabis, and I wanted to be a part of that. I really wanted to leave my mark. So I'm very hopeful that that landscape improves and we can all finally make decent money, because there's not a lot of cannabis companies out there that really make very much money at all.
Yeah.
Because
No.
it's a hard landscape.
Yeah, especially with the taxing,
Yep.
the way it is.
That's
a huge issue.
yeah.
But even beyond that, a lot of folks, even before they get to the taxes, even their EBITDA is in the negative sometimes,
Yeah.
because they just don't know how to run their numbers and everything else. I think that what you're saying, I just want to sort of clarify here, because I think this is along the lines of what you're thinking. Like, when you say stricter regulations, you're really emphasizing, like, if someone wants to be on the caregiver side of the market, great. If they want to be on the legal side of the market, you can't ride the line, right? Like, you can't be bringing in stuff into the regulated market from outside to unfairly compete.
Yes, that's
no
that's
judgment on
exactly it.
the unregulated market per se. It's just,
Yeah.
don't try to play the game and cheat at it.
Yeah, no, that's it. Stay on your side of the street. If
Yeah.
you're gonna do one thing, just do one thing. And you know what? I all credit to my friends and everybody I know that's still a caregiver. That's really hard right now too.
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the regulated marketplace has taken its toll on that side of the market as well. But
Well, there's some big players in Michigan that are very anti caregiver that have tried to
yeah,
push a lot of legislation as well, right?
yeah, I'm not on board with that, man. There are a lot of legitimate people who have a legitimate need for cannabis as a medication, and wherever I can help, I still have friends that try to connect with people. They need RSO, or they need a sublingual tincture because their oncologist says they can't smoke anymore. And those are, like, within the last month, those are two very real examples that I helped out with. There's a legitimate need for that, and I don't want that to go away, and I want people to have access to that. And some of those larger players, they don't see that. They think everybody should go into the store and buy what they need. But people on a fixed income, or cancer patients, or these people that have real afflictions, a lot of times they don't even have the disposable income. So if you find somebody that's
Right.
compassionate enough that will make these products that they can use, then that should exist. That's how I feel about that.
It's actually really interesting, because as the market went rec, right, in each municipality, the medical side just went kaput, right? So at this point, you really don't have a regulated medical market. And I think the caregivers, like I mean, there's some folks that do some stuff. I know Element does like an RSO syringe and a couple other people, but ultimately, like, it's not, those aren't huge segments in a dispensary, and you got a limited shelf space, right? So it's hard for a dispensary to justify it outside of just pure passion for supporting the medical market, right? But I think having the caregivers be able to focus on that stuff, which is really the spirit of the caregiver market in the first
Yep.
place, it really does have a place. And it's you got to lose the scarcity mindset of looking at that as a, you know, a cannibalism of the regulated market, because they're kind of two different things that really could synergistically work together, right? In many respects, especially if we start, like you said, knowing which side of the line you're on and sort of respecting that and not trying to screw each other over.
Definitely, I agree with that, and I also hope, you know, as we're talking about the future of the cannabis marketplace and landscape, that as the regulations become more clear and everything comes to it, that okay, dispensaries again have an incentive to be able to even carry those products again, because right now, you know, with 280E and all these things going on, you have to be very, very, very careful about what you spend your money on and what you give
Yeah,
shelf space to. You
100%.
can't stock all things. So I am
Yeah.
sympathetic to that as well.
What's your favorite business book?
You know, I'm not going to go with a single book. I'm going to just mention two authors.
Okay.
John C. Maxwell, who writes all sorts of books on leadership.
Yeah.
That's he's a really, really, really good author and a very good orator as well. You know, if you're in want to do podcasts that speaks a lot about leadership, and that was instrumental to my development as a person in trying to develop who I am and provide better leadership to our organization. And then Jeffrey Liker, who writes about Toyota manufacturing systems and lean
Good
manufacturing.
old lean.
Yep, that's it, and it's terribly boring, and but it is really good stuff. If you want to be good with processes and procedures and manufacturing, and that's what all this is. Those are
Yeah,
two concepts that you need to understand: lean manufacturing and good leadership.
I agree 100%. Yeah, Maxwell's one of my favorites too. I've probably read what 20 of his like 50 books. At
Yeah,
some point,
how many
I
books has that guy written? You know?
yeah, like at one point, I think I read like 6 of his books in a row, and then I like realized that there's only so much you could talk. Like pretty soon, you're seeing so many patterns that it's really just
Yeah,
a lot of the same things
kind of.
rehashed, which is great with new stories and stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've burned out on the new topics on that one. But yeah, he's great. I actually have what do you call it? The leadership. I did the leadership coaching program under him
Oh, really?
back in like, I don't know, 2010 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was a big fan for sure. What's your favorite line of genetics?
Man, that's like asking me what my favorite food is, and I'm a fat kid. And cannabis is like pizza, you know, from one pizza place to another pizza place, it's an
Yeah, it's
entirely
true.
different
It's
thing.
true.
You know, different toppings, different dough, different sauce. You have a totally different dish. My right now, I'm really big on, like everybody is, candy flavors, Z terps. You know, I started smoking Skittles. Geez, 2018. I've always had my fingers on the pulse of the genetics scene and world in a really heavy way.
Hmm.
I have a seed collection that is probably like a couple Ferraris. So
Oh wow.
it really, really, really is hard for me to pick. Um, I like I guess if we're talking about it from a commercial production side is one thing. If you're talking about it from a consumption side, it's another thing. But then you get into, you know, what are my favorite terps? I love papaya terps. I love Z terps, but I still love gas. I love ice cream. Sherb cream pie is huge right now. And candy fumes. I think candy fumes is probably one of my favorites right now. I'll try and stop there because that's like,
Are you guys processing any of that, or got a
yeah.
partner
Oh
growing it or
yeah.
anything? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I have relationships with a lot of breeders, and there's a lot of breeders who I've given clone only genetics
Hmm.
to create strains. Skunk Master Flex from Michigan is a homie of mine, and for the
Nice.
last few years, I've been plugging him with cuts to make strains from. Harry Palms and Bloom Seed Company is another one that I'm really big on right now. So Candy Fumes, he created that in collaboration with a guy who goes by Boston Roots Seed Company from Massachusetts, and it's a cross of Skittles and Sherbanger, I
Hmm.
believe. And the selection that I got from Harry, the Bloom Seed Company breeder, and it came as a gift, and it's a little bit of candy, a little cotton candy, but a lot of kind of ice cream flavor there too, some gas on the back end. It just took first place overall, and I think best flavor in Zolympics, Michigan, as well, with Archive. So we have the
Oh,
same.
nice. Yeah.
We don't process it into solventless hash
Okay.
just because it doesn't yield well, but we are actually throwing a hydrocarbon run together from the dry trim that I'm excited to try. But
There you go. A little cured resin.
smokes awesome in a joint, tastes super good, super
Yeah.
good. That's you know
It's hard to go wrong with like the Z back end too, I feel like.
it is, and there's you might as well enjoy whatever it is that you're smoking, right? Like you can get
Oh
high
yeah,
off
100%.
anything in a multitude of ways now.
Right.
Like I am here for flavor and experience at this point in my life. I want to provide memorable experiences to wherever we can through our brands. So those are the things that I'm after.
Well, yeah, the sensory experience, right? It's really what you
Yep.
get more than anything. And I think that as the market sort of gets more sophisticated, I won't say more sophisticated from experience because like Michigan is a long time medical market, but more in the sense of having access to some of these sort of more connoisseur type of products, right? They develop that sort of like the wine snob, right? Develops like a taste for specific high end wines over time. I think the same thing
Definitely,
with cannabis.
definitely.
Yeah. And some folks, it's like they have that, whether it's just like the traditional OG cut or whatever that's just their thing, right? But I think you kind of got the people that they like the new stuff and the new expressions of the old things and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So
It's a very diverse marketplace, and cannabis is a very diverse plant. So it
yeah.
provide a lot of different experiences for everybody out there.
What are some other things outside of cannabis, interests and hobbies? Obviously cooking, I imagine.
Yeah, well, I'm so obsessed with weed. It's it's pretty crazy, honestly. I really do try to spend a lot more time at home now with my family than what I used to. I Earlier
It's
on,
great.
I made mention about moving out of my parents' house when I was 17. I never went back, and all I've ever really known is work. And as
Yeah.
I've gotten older, I've really begun to appreciate those experiences a lot more and try and savor them. So I really try and spend time at home with my family where I can now, and out with my family. Um, and we go camping every now and again, which is a good time. But video games a little bit.
There you go.
I love Rocket League. If anybody, if you're familiar with Rocket League, or anybody out there is familiar with Rocket League, I love Rocket League.
Nice. You'll have to, what's your, what do you play it on?
Xbox One X.
Should throw your handle out there so people can.
Yeah, well, it's the same as and I guess I think your next question is how do we connect with you?
Yeah.
So it's the same as my Instagram name, which is Country Boys, and it's spelled Tree, boys, because we're in the cannabis industry, so you have to have a play on
There you
words
go.
in
You
there
do.
somewhere.
Absolutely. I like it.
That's right. That's right. So my Xbox Live name is Country Boys, but that's my Instagram name as well, Country_Boys, and that's if you really want to see the what's kind of weird stuff is going on in my mind, that's the place to look for sure, because I'll connect with people on a much different level in the professional atmosphere, but social media is it's a circus, so I might as well enjoy it.
Yeah, 100%. Where else can people find you on LinkedIn or what's your website?
Yep, on LinkedIn, just under my name, Dean St. Peter, and I'm not too active on there. I'm trying to get better, as we discussed, and that's how Ben and I found each other, actually.
Yeah.
At
Proponent to that.
Yes,
Awesome.
our website is currently under development, but there's arcanausa.com, traphouse company.co, I believe, and 3lesscannabis.com. But really, the best way for somebody to connect with me and reach out to me, probably LinkedIn or Instagram. If they really want to ring my bell, that's those are the places that they can hit me.
Excellent. Well, I'll throw those links into the show notes as well, so people can find you on there. And Dean, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
All
Chat
right.
with you.
Very good. Thank you very much, sir.